notebooks and your pen, because this is a free session that you're getting. You need to take all these tips down. You need to write everything as they're throwing it out. So Helen, thank you very much. And I hear you loud and clear talking about the need to understand. For a lot of entrepreneurs, they just jump into business and they actually haven't thought through on the strategy. A lot of them don't even understand anything about business modeling. And with this period that we've been faced to be locked down at home, what I found myself telling a lot of entrepreneurs is that use this period not as a period to just whine, but as a retreating period for a strategy retreat. So you can sit down and actually look at your business from a strategic perspective rather than all the activities you've been running and from an operational perspective. So thank you very much for sharing that. So it's the same question. Like I said, it's a general question. So I would like Toby to answer from his own perspective as somebody working in the insurance industry who has had to serve numerous entrepreneurs. For you, what do you see as the main challenges that are facing entrepreneurs as a consequence of the impact of COVID-19? Toby.
All right, thank you once again. I mean, Helen has literally touched on all the areas, but what is very imperative for our listeners to grasp and come to terms with is even understanding, for starters, what the risk is. Appreciating what the risk is then gives you a clearer insight in how you can then be proactive into mitigating or controlling those risks in the future. And in simple terms, I like to liken a risk as an uncertainty. So some scholars would define risk or a risk as a condition with the possibility of having an adverse deviation from your set objectives. And I strongly believe that every SME business or every business owner here starts out or sets out to go into business to be profitable, to flourish and to blossom into bigger enterprises, into the Dangotes that we have today, the Bill Gates and of Microsoft and the likes. But having that understanding first of what a risk is in its simplest form, which is what I've just tried to explain, that whatever it is that is going to deviate you from being a profitable venture should be identified as a risk. Even things as minimal as your cost expense, your expense base. You need to then itemize it, like Helen said. You need to look at your business model end to end, from start to finish, and then appreciate what are the possibilities that if this doesn't pan out, what's the impact is going to have on me? What's the impact is going to have on my revenues? What's the impact is going to have on my customer base? And the moment business owners appreciate this and are proactive enough to have a risk management plan in place that is then reviewed per time. We've talked about what COVID-19 is having, in our world today, and a very clear risk, that business owners have probably not embraced. While some have jumped at the opportunities, the risk of innovation. At times like this, business owners have to be very innovative. They have to be very creative. How am I going to get my service? How am I going to get my product across to people without physically being there? Am I able to offer this service online? Am I able to offer this solution through a different channel that will not expose or put my customers at risk of contacting the COVID-19 plague or whatever other elemental plague that is going around our circles? These are genuine questions that every business owner, regardless of whatever period or whatever stage they're in, are meant to begin to ask themselves. Because the moment you begin to ask these questions, then you begin to then provide the answers or begin to look for the answers that will then address the issues and build businesses forward. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that, Toby. And I'll move over now to Kayode. Kayode, from your own perspective, you're both in the insurance space. What are the immediate challenges that are facing entrepreneurs as a result of the consequence and impact of COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Neka. And I believe again that Subi and Helen have given very insightful contributions to the question. But let me just backtrack a bit just to help us understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with. Because the question that you actually asked is the question that touches on the, will I call it the epicenter of the Nigerian business as a whole. So to think about the fact that your basic SMEs contribute about 48% of our GDP, and they employ up to 84% of the workforce, and both businesses actually sit in that space, says a lot about the impact, or not of those kind of situations. So what are these impacts? I know Helen had spoken about individual risk and the need to have the right business models. And I think we built up on that to say, yes, you must understand the impact of the revenue on your customer base. And also you must have a risk management plan in place. And he used examples of COVID-19. But if I take that slightly further, it's to say,
oh dear, it appears we're losing you, Kayode. Hello, Kayode. Kayode, can you hear me? Okay, so while we're waiting for Kayode to get back, Adegboyega Adebajo signed in a while ago while Helen was speaking. So it's my pleasure to welcome Adegboyega Adebajo. He's here with us. So Boyega, please can you just do a brief intro of your background and what you're bringing to this conversation? And while you're doing that, to also reflect, the question I'd ask everybody, what are the immediate challenges of facing entrepreneurs as a consequence of the impact of COVID-19?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Neka.
Your voice is dragging. You sound like a robot.
Okay, so well, what am I bringing here? It's a bit of a mixed years. I guess I'm not going to be able to do much about that, but I hope it gets better. As time goes on. I might just, after I finish speaking, reconnect and see what happens then. So it's experience coming from banking, particularly large corporates, and then a segment on the SMEs, and coming with a view of how banks look at SMEs as a credit risk. And taking that framework in the time over the past 7 years, working with a lot of SMEs, realizing and gaining an insight into challenges from their own perspective. And these challenges go from setting up, trying to grow, trying to access supplies, and trying to access markets. And all these bring about their risks in particular. Yes, I have been listening to, and it's interesting to hear Toby speak about risk from an insurance person's perspective. I try to describe risk in everyday language as something, an event that will stop you from meeting your objective. Okay, and it's an event, but it hasn't.
Boyega. Okay. We've lost Boyega. Kayode, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. The internet seems to be fluctuating. But I think
Boyega,
he touched on a very good
challenge.
Yes, he started up a very good point. I'm referring to Boyega on the issue of credit risk. And I think that's really at the end of the day, that's really the bottom line to say, will your business survive? And the point I was trying to make earlier on was to say, when you then look at the fact that the Nigerian context shows that most businesses are typically SMEs, it means that if you don't have the right framework a classic example of what is happening with COVID-19 is what we would continue to face. So what are the direct impacts? The first is you would see declining revenues, an inability to actually provide the kind of goods and services, and I think someone touched on that earlier on, to reach those who need them. Number two is you would also see a very low capacity to absorb the shocks. So what are the shocks that we see? Now is the fact that prices are going down. Obviously, prices are going higher. The oil issues also coming to sort of distort things here and there. And it then leads to the fact that SMEs need to take certain decisions. Can I continue to keep the staff that I have? That brings up the issue of loss of job. How best can we actually manage our revenues or expenses in a way that does not infringe entirely on the existence of that business? So when you look at it in its entirety, like Beriga has said, every facet of the business has certain risks that must be identified and must be planned for. And I think that as we go ahead, we'll be able to also share, more in that light of ensuring that you're able to better plan for and cope with this risk.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Listening to all of you talking, you've talked about the revenue dip. There's been mention of maybe staff either resizing, downsizing, but whatever, looking at the staff, and I'm hearing cost and all that. So my next question now, because for me, we always just say risk, but we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about business. So I'm now wondering, how can businesses ensure continuity? So now I'm talking about business continuity. It's very, very important. For a lot of people, it's a phrase that they always attribute to the large corporates. Oh, they have a business continuity plan. It's something that they're working on. They're constantly looking at it. But with what is happening now, with everything that you're saying, with everything that we've seen, we look at the US alone, you're looking at almost 30 million people filing for unemployment benefits. All over the world, there's been all sorts of things that has caused uncertainty and stress. And uncertainty and stress are two critical things you do not need when you're talking about running a business. So now this is another general question. How can businesses ensure continuity in light of everything that is happening and more? You just mentioned